also SMS us on 22155. It's absolutely free to do so. Let me reintroduce my guest to you once more. We have Ahmed Nasir Abdullahi. Thank you. And we have Honorable Peter Kaluma. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining us tonight. I want us to start off because I really want our discussion to focus on the way forward and where we go from here. But I just want us to get this out of the way. Reactions to that. You've written an article, Ahmed Nasir. You've been tweeting about it. So I'd just like to give both of you the opportunity. I'll start with you to give us your views on that. And in fact, what has been said about the dissenters, much focus has been on them in this verdict.
Thank you. I think we should get the basics right, that the Supreme Court has powers to invalidate an election of a president is not in doubt. And, although we were surprised, on 1st of March when they invalidated it, you remember immediately I spoke and said, we have heard you, but we want you to give us a good reason why you have done so. So on 20, when it was 20th, when they gave the ruling, yeah. It was, it was such a wishy-washy. I mean, they couldn't justify the decision they have made. And everybody will agree, really, that the decision the Supreme Court gave in invalidating the election was so unsatisfactory that the only basis for the same was a political decision to deny President Uhuru a re-election and to give Raila a second chance. That was a political decision. From a legal point of view, they disregarded 20 to 30 decisions of the Supreme Court they have made, which they established the law to be that irregularity when it's there. And irregularities happens everywhere in the world. There is no election that's perfect anywhere in the world. They said if there is irregularity, the law is that if there is irregularity, you must show that it will wipe out the 1.4 million difference. That was the law. But now they could not bring a legal argument that was satisfactory to even a lay person. Instead, they brought a political decision that says numbers don't matter, contrary to an express provision of the Constitution that says numbers matter, and the person who wins the presidential election is the person who gets the highest vote.
All right.
Yes.
Political decision?
I'm shocked. This is the position as to why I believe Jubilee and IEBC lost the case. Even when we went to court, we were very clear about the case we are arguing. I mean, Ahmed is a good lawyer. What does Article 2 of the Constitution say when you violate any constitutional provision? It says any act you undertake in so doing is null and void. It is as simple as that. We went to court and we walked the Supreme Court through Article 1, Article 10 dealing with our national values and principles of governance, Article 38 dealing with political rights, Articles 81 to 86 dealing with the manner in which elections have to be conducted. And we satisfied the court that there were constitutional violations. So that if you look at the decision of the Supreme Court, you're being told there are violations of the constitutions, there are violations of the law, there are irregularities. And let us be honest with one another. As scrutiny, if you remember, Yvonne, was ordered in the middle of the process. I mean, Ahmed should tell us today, when you are told that 56 of the statutory forms which relayed the results of the presidential vote were fake, what results can you relay on fake papers? When you are told that in five constituencies, the statutory forms remitted in terms of Form 34B were not signed by the various returning officers. I mean, what is the status in law of that document? And cumulatively, when up to 94 constituencies results are affected in terms of the authenticity of the material, either they are not signed or otherwise. And in law, Ahmed, the Nigerian, the Ghanaian case and others say very clearly, if you have that situation, all those are invalid. In fact, the Supreme Court, to me, failed to give you the numbers. But look at those 94 constituencies, and you are at over 5 million valid votes cast in the count, whose honors you don't legitimately know. So I want us to be fair. I was personally, shocked at the dissenting determination. But really, let us not refuse.
Why were you shocked at the dissenting determination?
Let us not refuse, to agree with the court when there is need for agreement. Partly, I think we were there because of this attitude by the lawyers on the Jubilee side and on the IEBC side. And Yvonne, that thing was broadcast live. I mean, how did the lawyers, treat, the court proceedings? You are asked a simple question like, what is a rejected vote? What is a stray vote? How do you treat voting? You don't know.
Okay, I'd like us to talk
gotta-
about...
But you are talking about the dissent. And Ahmed, let us for once, agree that we are being a bit, drawn back. We are respecting the judicial authority. I can tell you in serious democracies, Judges Joki Ndungu and Judges Ojwang would be facing disciplinary action.
Why?
Because look at what Njoki took us through. Did the judge even understand the case we were dealing with? The judge is treating the process of verification and taking us through over 150 pages, telling us how verification takes place.
So how is that misconduct?
When the legal issue we are asking is, what is a verifiable result in law? She didn't understand. And by the way, we know these judges. I can tell you, the decision was so shallow. A judge tells you that beyond what happened in court, I went doing my own investigations.
Well, she
The
didn't say
nature
she
of
did
which
her
she does
own
not share.
investigations. She
That's
talked
what
about...
she's saying.
Nasser,
I think
do you
let
wanna
us first
explain?
get it right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There were two reasons or grounds why the Supreme Court nullified the presidential election. One is that IEBC, because they refused to open their server, they were in contempt of court, and because they disobeyed a court order, that was the main reason why the election was nullified. The court made an inference, which is unheard of anywhere in the world. You can't make an inference like that, that because someone has disobeyed a court order, it means that the computers were hacked. I mean, such an absurdity from the Supreme Court is, I mean, it's such, I've never heard of such a thing, that because you disobeyed my order, I'm nullifying the election. That was the main reason. The second one was that certain forms were not signed. And again, that was false, because we have shown, and I think the judgment of Justice Njoki clearly show that the forms that were deposited pursuant to Section 12 of the Supreme Court Act were actually signed. Where these guys got those unsigned documents and how they put it into the system of the court is something that needs investigation at a future date.
Gentlemen, I'd like us to move forward to what happens next. I'll start with you, Ahmed Nasser, because your client, President Uhuru Kenyatta, is asking for a recount of the votes. And many say that this may have been a failing on your part as his lawyer in court for not cross-petitioning and asking for a recount of the votes.
Oh, those are layman's views. That there's nothing like that in law. There's nothing called cross-petition in the Supreme Court. There's only a petition, and the respondent who is the winner does not ask for recount because he has already won. Why should there be a recount? He has already won. The figures
but his win is the subject of the court petition.
Yes. But
so why not ask for a recount?
Why should I ask for a recount? The result shows that our client has won by 1.4 million.
But the result was in dispute, was it not?
No, it is for them to ask for recount.
Fake results.
Yes, it's for them to ask for recount. But you see, this notion that, the lawyers should have asked for recount doesn't even arise at all.
Okay, so was it for you to ask for a recount?
If one of the position that Ahmed Nasir and others came with to court is that results are results even if you steal them. You don't need to explain how you reach them. If you saw the reasoning of even the dissenting judges and their positions. But let me tell you, we made an application for scrutiny, including an application for recount. And you remember the lead lawyer on the side he was, that was Muite or Ngatia? No, he was on the side of Ngatia. But that was Muite. Muite confirmed they have no problem availing all documents, including the ballot papers for scrutiny. What did Ngatia, who was leading him, do? Ngatia said, I'm shocked about this. I have to consult my client. And when they came back, both Muite Ngati and Ahmed Nasir were now posing scrutiny, access to technology, including ballot recount. What you should be asking Yvonne is that now that they are seeking recount, what is this new thing that has happened between the time they were resisting it when we applied for it and now? And for us on our part, we are saying, you want to go back to court, we will meet you there. I only hope that they have not now stuffed ballot papers into those ballot boxes. But we are ready to meet them any day.
These are the usual stories. The good thing about my learned friends' political party is they never run short of excuse. The ingenuity in bringing new excuse every time they met the Waterloo is confounding.
Now, did you oppose recount?
Wait. It's when we go for election on 26, when they lose, because they will lose, they will come with more excuse. They will come.
Yvonne, let us deal with.
Did you oppose the recount?
Yvonne, didn't you oppose recount?
No, there was nobody who asked for recount.
We applied for recount.
There was
But
no,
let's be clear,
what they
was it a
asked-
recount for you asked for?
We
or a
applied
scrutiny?
for scrutiny of all ballot materials, actually all election materials. And then that moved from the statutory forms, the ballot papers, and the technology applied. And they are specified there. They opposed it.
They applied for access to certain computer issues. We opposed that, and the court gave orders on how that should be done. But there was no vote recount or anything like that.
Okay, so then where do we go from here? I'd like to hear from you, Kaluma, on the way forward now, because there's quite a bit of rhetoric that's going on. I'd like us to focus on the IEBC, because be that as it may, there was dissenting voices within the Supreme Court, but the majority decision carried the day, which is that we go for a repeat election. But so what do we do? What do you see for IEBC? Because we're hearing no reforms, no elections. But is there short-term reforms, long-term reforms? Is that
Correct.
where we start to think?
My best case scenario, Yvonne, is that we need not to grandstand around the Supreme Court decision. Whether you want to support the dissenting judges or the majority, the fact of the matter is that the ultimate decision of the court nullified the elections. And what we should be looking at is how we move forward. Now, my view is that in moving forward, one, we must be cognizant that the elections, the fresh elections, must take place within, 60 days, lest we plunge ourselves not into just, a constitutional crisis, but, a political crisis of proportions I don't want to imagine. So let us start from the premise that we need elections within 60 days. Now, if we are going to need elections within 60 days, let us see how we are going to comply with the Supreme Court decision and those constitutional, provisions to ensure that the fresh elections are not, in conflict with the law, because we don't want to be in the business of repeat elections every time. Now that would require that we be a bit objective. Let us look at the decisions of the court. Let us find those lapses which led to the nullification of the elections. And even let me tell you, we are talking here of fake statutory forms. That's why, as NASA, we are saying, we would have a problem with a printer who does not come forth to tell us where the contractual, forms went to and why fake forms were now being used, being given the contract again. We have a problem of infiltration of technology. That is the language the Supreme Court is using in the majority determination. How did we have a technology which is so insecure that strangers would enter?
All right,
How did we have a technology?
So which ones of those
yes,
can we do before the 26th?
So my view in terms of
Which
the
ones do we start
procurement
to
law,
look at it
in
after?
terms of the procurement law, let us not have this situation of thinking that a particular supplier must be the person to provide these services. It will be direct procurement because we have barely, 30 days. Let us change the technology, farm. Let us deal with Al-Ghurair. In terms of IEBC, I would pray we don't go for the chair, because if you go for the chair, then you lack the national returning officer for the presidential vote. But these other
Mr.
people we
Kaluma?
can do without, and the system runs, should leave.
So let's talk about that, because you're talking about evicting Chiloba on Tuesday, going to the anniversary towers. This would seem to be in conflict because some members of your party have said they're going to institute private prosecution. Fine. But so why go for these extrajudicial means?
It is not extrajudicial. I mean...
Well, when you talk of evicting somebody who is in office, regardless of what you might think about his performance, but evicting him from his office?
Let me tell you, Yvonne, there is the language of a politician and the language of a lawyer. I want to believe NASA is saying we are going to secure the removal of Chiloba from office.
And how do you do that? By protesting outside anniversary towers?
Remember, Yvonne, there is a problem if you've been seeing the internal conflict. I saw it in your news item here. So something, attuned to that. You see a situation in which the chair comes and, creates a project team, and then there is a reversal immediately. You see situations where the chair and some commissioners are saying we need to have changes, and you see some resistance coming after that. What we are saying is that if you are at a level where you are continued, being, the continuity of your being in IEBC would negative a proper, fresh election, then, go aside. Let the processes go on.
Okay. Ahmed Nasser?
Don't Kenyans get tired of the hypocrisy of NASA? Don't we get tired of this? These are the guys who are happy that the Supreme Court has made a declaration. Among the decisions the Supreme Court made is that Chalopa or Chupakati or any commissioner or any employee has not done anything that they found criminally culpable. That's the decision. Wait, that's the decision of the court. And there's an express, you know, a whole paragraph or two on that. NASA has been agitating for about 20 years now to tilt the playing field in their favor so that they can win. They have done everything. You remember Isaac and his commissions, and Raila, the way they were invading the streets and, you know, demonstrating on the roads, saying that they want to evict. They removed the whole commission because they said, we have lost the last election because of Ahmed Isaac and his commission. If you remove Ahmed Isaac, they said, we are confident we will win. Ahmed Isaac and his commissioners were removed. Last time it was 800, they doubled the loss. It's 1.4 million. Now they're saying, no, now we have lost it. It is Chipukati and Chaloba and some other, some minor employees. They said we have lost that because, we can't be removing people from their jobs because Raila imagines that he will win if X or Y is removed.
What changes would you want to see at IBC? Do you believe any changes should be made?
It's bewildering, Just because you lose an election, you blame.
No, but the Supreme Court has said.
Let me tell you one thing. Raila loses elections because he doesn't have the votes. It's not because Chaloba is there or Chipukati is there. Wait.
Why can't you be a lawyer, Ahmed?
I'm a lawyer. These are legal issues I'm pressing.
Don't try me with politics.
Listen, Raila and NASA do not lose elections because of either a returning officer or a secretary or a legal officer in the IPC. You don't lose that. Raila loses elections because he doesn't have the votes on the ground. And if you look at the voter layout in this country, it's almost mathematically impossible for him to win an election.
All right. Yes. Aside from Raila and Uhuru and all of those,
what reforms would you?
Do you believe that any reforms should be made at the electoral management
let
body?
me go that.
That no election is perfect.
Let me go back. When he removed Ahmed Isaac and the commissioners, we undertook a comprehensive legislative reforms on the election law. There was a bipartisan committee chaired by my friend Orengo and Kareitu Murungi. They went through all the law. They changed the law. They said, this is what we want. It was enacted. That was last year. Not last year, actually. It was
and they amended them after that.
Yes. They amended all the law.
Jubilee amended them.
Everything NASA wanted was enacted. And they said, now we are ready. Now, because they lost, they said, no, we want the law to be...
Yvonne would answer your question.
Let me finish. The only thing that will satisfy this piece, my learned friend and his principal, is to have a law that appoints some people like nominated president. That's all.
Yvonne, Ahmed would not answer this question.
Which one?
Because it is not in the interest of Jubilee to see any change in IEBC. IEBC is theirs and it is their enterprise for rigging. And you jolt IEBC for Jubilee, they go berserk. Let me tell you.
But didn't we bring the new commission?
The Supreme Court has said there were systemic and systematic problems leading to the nullification of the problems.
They didn't use those words.
Okay, let me use a simple word. The Supreme Court said the problems which led to the nullification of the elections were widespread. You could not target a single individual. And by the way, look at the decision of Judge Muilu, Judge Maraga, and others.
A single individual.
When you are talking about a widespread situation, it means it is cutting through the institution. The ideal situation would have been for us to have the Supreme Court decision determine on its proper, objective interpretation, how widespread is this problem, and get all persons involved to go. But we are saying,
hang on a moment.
Yes.
Because the DPP has directed investigations into the ongoings at IEBC.
Correct.
But you're not waiting for that process.
I'm telling you, the answer, Yvonne, is very simple. Do you want people who are being investigated for purposes of criminal culpability, possible criminal culpability, preside over the next elections? That is what we are dealing with. And that is why even the DPP, if you saw, and this is what I was telling Ahmed, we made a petition, or we issued a notice in respect of everybody, including the chair. But if you see, the DPP is deliberately leaving the chair. He's saying for the elections to go through, at least we need the national returning officer. The others we have to deal with.
But you're not targeting Chebukati, but you're going after...
I'm not saying so. You didn't hear me. I'm telling you, in the short term, it would not be wise to go for Chebukati because then there will be no elections. We want an election.
No, but let us get this right because it's good for us to be honest about what the judgment said. The judgment did not say that there were criminal activities that occurred. No. The Supreme Court said irregularities.
And illegalities.
And illegalities.
Correct.
Irregularity means an illegality as it relates to the election procedure. This means the forms that were not signed, those are the irregularities the Supreme Court was talking about.
And the illegality?
The illegality, I don't know what it meant, but, but basically of the same. Irregularity, forms were not signed. Illegality, actually, illegality is that instead of transmitting the form and the message, there were certain places where only the message came or the picture didn't come. Those are the kind of irregularity and illegality it's talking about. It does not mean, like my learned friend and his principals talk about, that someone committed murder or certain other criminal offenses. No. Irregularities in relation to forms, illegality in relation to transmission. That's what the court...
Even the Supreme Court says it must be in very rare cases that you nullify an election. And that those illegalities, violations of the Constitution and irregularities must be so substantial. In fact, that is the position of the court in the majority decision. What I would request my brother to do, you know, this attitude, yes, is the attitude they had before the Supreme Court. And partly, to me, this is the attitude as to why they lost, you know, the map in terms of our submissions. The thing is,
you didn't win.
Don't refuse. Ahmed Nasir, let me tell you. You know, even when
don't delude yourself that you won.
I'm speaking
because of your submissions.
I'm speaking. You've said you'll go for recount. Go for it. You will lose again with this attitude. You know, when the judgment of the majority was being read, Ahmed was busy tweeting. And by the way, by what you are saying, you confirm to me that you've not read that judgment.
No, I've read.
Go and take time as the lawyer for President Uhuru Kenyatta and advise him properly in terms of how we should move forward. And I'm telling you, Yvonne, that the current kind of solution we need is not even legal. Let us have goodwill between the key stakeholders, NASA and Jubilee, in terms of the bare minimums we need to put into place for the elections to go through. These grandstandings and undertaking positions, you want to contradict decisions, will not help.
Okay, I want us to take a look at another issue, because we're talking about what happens as we go forward as a result of this Supreme Court verdict. Your client, Ahmed Nasir, and indeed members of his political party, are now contemplating going to Parliament and instituting law to reduce powers of the Supreme Court. In other words, to ensure that it can no longer nullify
I'm not
a presidential petition.
I mean, I'm not aware.
What's your position on that stand?
The law is very clear.
Yeah.
Nobody can change the law unless you amend the Constitution. The Supreme Court has powers to nullify a presidential election. That it has power. But it normally does, and everywhere in the world they do it on legal basis. This case, you know, which we have protested all over the place, is that they have not done it according to the law. They have, and you know, it's a fallacy.
So you, as an officer of the court, as a senior ranking member of the court, would not be thinking about perhaps curtailing the powers of the Supreme Court?
No, we should not curtail. I mean, these are, you know, just because a number of judges made a decision, you don't curtail the court's powers. I mean, these judges will not be there. Some of them will not be there during the next election petition. They will retire or they may go on their own. But you see, we have no problem with the powers of the court because the Supreme Court plays a very pivotal role. What we have a problem is some judge acting like God, you know, to give a political decision, giving a chance to a person who was resoundingly defeated, a second chance. And even when you give him a second chance, you can see, he say he doesn't want to go to court because NASA's own calculation will show that this beating of 26 will be worse than the beating of 8th. That's why they don't want to go to election.
You know, Yvonne, let us stop this propaganda that Uhuru Kenyatta won the elections. You cannot win elections on fake results, results which cannot be accounted for or be verified. Uhuru Kenyatta rigged elections with the help of IEBC. And to me, that is the extent to which I fault the Supreme Court in their majority. Because they're saying there are illegalities and irregularities, but they are not, you know, apportioning or attributing them to anybody. I mean, was IEBC rigging elections for themselves? Were they contesting?
Did you expect the Supreme Court to be a little bit more prescriptive in their orders?
No, the Supreme Court has no criminal jurisdiction.
Yes.
Certainly, they don't have criminal jurisdiction. But to go to the extent of saying we didn't find any criminal, you know, culpability, as if that is within their jurisdiction, to me was a slip. They ought to have left that to the DPP and the criminal, you know, justice, you know, process. And that is why you remember when Wetangula was being hunted over, those criminal culpability issues raised by the court then, we resisted it as court. And let me remind my brother that, NASA is not even 1 year old. So don't talk of NASA as if we have had an attitude. Now, the position that...
in a moment, Ahmed.
Yes, that you can see from Jubilee. And by the way, you saw their Secretary General speak the other time. I think it was yesterday. They're saying now on Tuesday we are going to court to make amendments to the law, to make it easy for us, to overcome the Supreme Court or to limit the powers. Why are you doing that? Isn't it a confirmation by Jubilee that indeed they were rigging? And they insist on, having the system that...
Now, some arguments are very tired, They are repeated,
No, Tuju spoke yesterday.
When he said, for example, that Uhuru has rigged, I mean, look at the MCS. I mean, Jubilee has swept. Look at the women representative.
Nivifaranga via computer, what
we have swept. Yeah. His party now, ODM, is a small regional party that comes from Lower Nyanza. 80% of the MPs of ODM comes from Lower Nyanza. There are 10% that comes from Coast and 10% the rest of the country. It has been reduced to a small regional party. Now,
why is Ahmed trying? ODM has 70 MPs. Lower MPs together are barely 25. I think you need to...
Let me tell my friend that the defeat that befell his party was sweeping and across the board.
Yes.
They lost the presidential election resoundingly. They are a small party in parliament. They have few governors. They have few MCS. They have few...
But Ahmed Nasser, it is possible to have a president who presides over a minority.
No, it is possible, but you see...
It has happened.
No, but yes, but the point I'm making...
did not have a majority.
The point I'm making is that Jubilee won every election they contested. They won...
So does it follow?
Of course it follows.
So in the case of Barack Obama and a number of others,
Barack Obama had almost... They were even in the Senate.
They were even... No, they were 42 against 105.
So the point I'm making is that you see, the presidential election is aggregate of the votes. So when you win the MCS, when you win the women representative and parliament, you will naturally win.
But Ahmed Nasser, it is possible to vote for what person, MCA from one party, to even vote for an independent for MP, and vote for somebody else entirely for
That's why Raila and Uhuru, both of them were saying three-piece suit, or six-piece suit.
But that's not necessarily the case. It doesn't follow that when a voter goes into a polling station.
It does. In Kenyan politics, it does.
Fair enough, I'll give you that.
Three issues. What Ahmed is not telling you is why, for the first time in our electoral cycle, we have over 300 petitions in court. It's because you did not just rig the presidential vote. You are rigging all votes, including MCS in particular regions. And that is why you have that number. Let us wait for that
all the elections.
But two, let me tell Ahmed something that he does not know about our politics. He's struggling to play politics with the law. There are so many reasons as to why, for instance, you'd go to Kisii region, Yvonne, and you get barely a single ODM MP, despite Raila getting the presidential vote there. We have internal, competition within, the coalition. We have the rigging by Jubilee in the areas they rig. Let me tell you, you are northeastern Kenya, there was no election. If you took time to read those papers.
Who told you?
I mean, it was before court.
Just because you got 0 votes doesn't mean it was rigged.
So what we want to say is that let us wait for the determinations to be made. Either way, let us not gloat over the presidential vote based on, other electoral, positions whose elections are determined by other considerations altogether.
Can I answer one point?
Yes.
90% of the election petitions were filed after the judgment of the Supreme Court. Everybody thought that because the threshold for nullifying election was lowered, that's why people rushed to court.
Can we focus on what happens going forward? And legally speaking, because a number of issues have come up on either side, just where you think we go from here. And a lot of people worried that we might be going back to Machozi Mondays, and why NASA is not willing to wait for the DPP's investigation, why you're pinpointing certain individuals and saying, so-and-so must go and so-and-so is responsible for some of these issues that have taken place. Just to clarify the position on that, what reforms and how specifically will they be resolved between now and the 26th? Or are you not going to participate in the election?
Yvonne, we spent 42 billion in these elections. And I can tell you, as a person sitting in Justice and Legal Affairs Committee, our election has been said to be one of the most expensive in Africa. In fact, I can tell you. in the 11th Parliament. I may not say it now because I see the more I say it, the more the determination on the other political formation to keep us to the past. But I tell you, when you have such amount of money being spent, and then that election is nullified, it requires a bit of some, introspection. Let people pull back. Let us not look at personalities. Ahmed, if we were to look at those judges who dissented, you'd, run from them. But we are saying that is not necessary. Because we know the motivations,
what of the majority
like the ones
that
you're
give
talking
the
about. Let me tell
decision?
you know Juang.
I know
you know
John, yes.
Njoki, and
Yes.
how they rank with those
And the others also I know.
What I'm saying is that let us not go into that. Let us be, as a nation, seated with a judgment objectively and make a resolution. My thinking is this. We are told that technology was to be applied following the amendments, the bipartisan amendments to the laws it referred to. We need to question as a nation, why did our technology fail? And you've seen it even from the memos of Chebukati. We had even satellite phones to relay results where, the KIMS failed. What happened? And if it is the problem with saffron or MOFO or whatever, why would IEBC insist it is, that this saffron or MOFO to do it? Look at, Ahmed, the distillation of the majority decision on the ballot papers. I mean, we didn't know it. And let me for once thank you in public for it. But we didn't know that the security features, those statutory forms were to bear on the ballot papers, were actually prescribed in a contract. They're the ones who brought them. Now they should be asking, how can we have a situation where, if I were them, Uhuru, according to them, won, then it is nullified because fake papers are used. What happened to the original, papers? Where is the contract? And in a situation where Al Ghurair is not coming up to say it, should we go back still with Al Ghurair? So I'm saying something like changing, the contracted parties in terms of technology, in terms of paper. If we have 30 days to go. This is a direct contract. Make a choice. If they made a good decision immediately, the Supreme Court rendered its determination. We would have even gone for a restricted tender that would allow for more opportunity for people to come forward. But I'm saying there is still time to do good in terms of dealing with saffron, in terms of dealing with Al Ghurair. Then let us come to the commission. Let us ask ourselves, who are these individuals without whom we cannot have elections? And I can tell you within the context of the Constitution, it is only the chairperson. Let us then look at the determination and single out those individuals who are so culpable that we cannot allow them to have a repeat performance over the fresh elections. And if there is goodwill, we would easily agree on those issues. That is our position.
I've said this. I mean, first, there is no requirement. Nobody can force Raila to go for elections. It's not even necessary. If he wants, he can go. If he does not want, the rest of Kenyans can go. There may be some small parts in Kenya where people might not vote, but I'm confident that when Kenyans are given...
Yvonne, this is the careless talks we don't want. My friend, we are looking at a crisis.
Be careful.
This is a big crisis.
Let me finish.
Ahmed.
All right,
let me finish.
Let's let him finish.
It is not necessary for Raila to participate in an election. Nobody can force him. He is a candidate that is putting himself forward for election. If you don't want, you step aside. If you think you can win and you have the numbers, you go forward. So that's what the law is. For example, if Raila says that he will not contest, that's up to him. The election will occur on 25th, 26th, and the candidate who is there has to satisfy the requirement of the Constitution. He must get 50 plus 1, and he must get 50%, 25% of that. This idea that because you don't get elected, you blame people every time, and you remove them, it will be an endless,
Yvonne.
It will be a circus. It will be a circular process. I mean, last time we removed a whole commission because Raila said that I didn't win in 2013 because of X, Y, Z. I mean, do we again remove the same guys because he has not won? Next, of course, maybe 2020 we will run again. Do we again remove everybody again? I mean, it will be so unfortunate that every time Raila wants some people to be removed, the country goes into this agitative mood and we remove them. No. These are independent body that run election. And so far, even the Supreme Court has found them not guilty on any offense, and I don't see any reason. My learned friend will say that, oh, let us have some meetings, let us agree on this, let us do some reforms. 26 is too short a period. Let Kenyans vote in a peaceful manner and elect a president of their choice.
Let me ask you this,
Yes.
because it has been said that if the election is done in pretty much the same manner that it was done on the 8th of August, that we will end up pretty much in the same situation we find ourselves in now.
No, but you see, but let me ask you,
including what the Supreme Court judges said, that if no changes are made.
What went wrong on 8th August? What went wrong?
You won't understand.
Let me finish. Let me finish.
Yeah.
15 million Kenyans voted. They elected all the people they wanted to elect. The results were declared on the polling station as required. Everybody knows the two presidential candidates, what they got. That result is still there. The will of the people was established. What failed was transmission. You can transmit the result on the back of a donkey. That's what the law, Section 44A provides for alternative transmission. I mean, that's why we say the decision was political, because one is the voters' choice have been ascertained in the polling station, and that has been captured, and there is no dispute. For God's sake, how does it matter how it's transmitted?
So based on what the judges said,
but that's why we say the judgment was a political decision.
But you accepted the judgment either way, and it stands.
What alternative do we have?
Yvonne, right. Let me tell you that, and Ahmed, you know, we've never disputed that people voted. What we are saying is that after people voted and they were counted, their results were placed aside and fake forms were filled and brought to Nairobi. And that is what the court confirms.
Those are tiring arguments.
No, not tiring arguments. Tiring. And what I want to say,
get tired of that.
Let me teach you, Ahmed. You have limited knowledge on politics. When Uhuru is running, is not Uhuru running. By the way, he's holding the hopes of millions of people. So don't take it light that it is Uhuru we see us running. When Raila is running, Yvonne, take it out of your thinking that you are bashing Raila and your thinking is the one running. By the way, let me now tell you, this is our position. Until those reforms are effected to secure that the elections will be free and fair, Ahmed, you can have your elections wherever you imagine they will be, but it will not be elections within the Republic of Kenya.
Where will it be?
Yes.
What will it be?
Whatever you will call them. And by the way, this careless talk is how to divide this country.
All right, gentlemen.
And you may regret not being responsible as we go through it.
Here's the question that I asked in the beginning, and I want to ask it as we close. Where do we go from here? I'll start with you.
You see, this is not a banana republic. You know, there's a legal structure that governs our elections. That's why we have a Supreme Court that nullified a presidential election, although we believe that there was no basis. The Supreme Court said that hold the elections within 60 days. The 60 days are about to come to an end. The constitutional body that's mandated to hold elections will hold it on 26th. There is something called a constitutional process and extra-constitutional process. And my learned friend and his associates are pursuing an extra-constitutional process, a process that's not provided for by the Constitution. Removing X because I lost, removing Y because I lost. I don't want this printer because I lost. I don't want this machine because I lost. I mean, why don't we nominate them to become president then?
Where next?
Where do we go from here?
Elections must be held within 60 days under the Constitution. And our prayer is that it be held. Our condition is that it will be held in a manner that secures compliance with those constitutional principles the Supreme Court reiterated and are in the Constitution itself. So anything less than that is no election. My prayer is that this grandstanding must stop. We begin talking about how to comply with those principles as we go for elections. Let me end by saying that Uhuru Kenyatta is a person we don't need to campaign against. Ahmed. We will beat him in any free and fair elections. But we will not go into an election with a system he will use to rig. That will not happen.
Thank you, gentlemen. Honorable Peter Kaluma and Ahmed Nasir Abdullahi, I thank you both very much for coming in. He's the Member of Parliament for Homa Bay Town and was also in the NASA legal team at the Supreme Court. Ahmed Nasir Abdullahi was representing President Uhuru Kenyatta, who was the third respondent in that Supreme Court petition. So